Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter across the country, here on TV and of course on GB News Radio. We've plenty coming up. It's the economy, stupid! We review the prospects for you and me economically in 2022. Also, a new way of looking after police under pressure. All that and more, but first let's bring you a full news update. Here's Olivia Guthrie.
Thank you. This is your news at midday. The Education Secretary's become the first government minister to back reducing the isolation period from 7 to 5 days. Nadhim Zahawi says he will be led by the UK Health Security Agency on the matter, but he thinks cutting the isolation time would help teaching staff shortages. Mr Zahawi is also insisting lateral flow tests will remain free following reports they could be limited to high-risk settings. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Labour Party had criticised such a wrong-headed move, but Mr Zahawi says he's puzzled by a report in the Sunday Times suggesting their universal availability might be axed. Meanwhile, the UK has reached a total COVID-related death toll of more than 150,000 since the pandemic began. Court documents claim the Australian government did not give Novak Djokovic an assurance his medical exemption to enter the country would be accepted. The tennis player's legal team has said the authorities indicated he met the requirements for quarantine-free entry. Djokovic is spending a fourth day in an immigration detention centre ahead of a court hearing tomorrow. Player Renata Vorakova from the Czech Republic has now left the country after having her visa cancelled. Foreign Secretary says she's prepared to override unilateral parts of the post-Brexit agreement on Northern Ireland if negotiations fail. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Liz Truss warns she's willing to trigger Article 16, which would suspend parts of the treaty designed to prevent a hard border with the Republic. She's meeting her EU counterpart next week for face-to-face talks. Talking to GB News, former First Minister of Northern Ireland Arlene Foster accused the EU of having double standards.
In fact, they've said, it would cause serious consequences if it was triggered by the United Kingdom, despite the fact, of course, that they triggered it last January in terms of the supply of vaccine exports. They then withdrew it, but in withdrawing it, they said they reserved the right to do it again if necessary.
Minister being urged to go further to help flat owners remove dangerous cladding. The government has announced plans to make developers cover the £4 billion cost of cladding changes to buildings over 11 metres. But Labour say the measures do not extend to other non-cladding related costs for leaseholders. Darren Matthews is a leaseholder. He says the measures should be enforced rather than voluntary.
I don't honestly think, in my opinion, developers will make a voluntary contribution. I think the only way that they will make a contribution and have any responsibility is if it's under legal duress, if it's enshrined in law, if it's there in black and white. This is your responsibility, these are consequences. If you don't do it, we'll come after you. They're not going to make a voluntary contribution.
The biggest ever space telescope mirror has now moved into place and could explore the depths of the universe.
We have a fully deployed JWST observatory.
All right.
Engineers from NASA and the European Space Agency celebrated as its 18 hexagonal mirror segments straightened out into their full shape. The James Webb Space Telescope was launched by rocket on Christmas Day. Webb project manager Bill Ox says it was a nervous moment just before they successfully deployed the telescope.
There was a huge sigh of relief. I think you could see that if you watched the video of us being in there today when that final mirror got latched and the folks in the back room were doing the wave. We're all up giving each other high fives, so that's all of a sign of relief.
No-fly zone could be put over Windsor Castle. The Metropolitan Police are reviewing security at the Queen's residence. An application's been made for a restriction that would prevent aircraft lower than 2,500 foot passing overhead. It's after an alleged intruder carrying a crossbow was arrested on Christmas Day at the castle. And the Duchess of Cambridge has released 3 new portraits to mark turning 40 today. Fashion photographer Paolo Roversi took the birthday pictures, which show Kate in a series of Alexander McQueen dresses with her hair flowing. She's also wearing a pair of earrings that once belonged to her mother-in-law, Diana, Princess of Wales. It's 5 minutes past 12. You're right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart.
Olivia, thanks very much indeed, and welcome to those of you watching us on TV and to all of you listening on radio who are tuned in today. Coming up this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, the American campaign strategist James Carville coined the phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." We're looking at the economic outlook for 2022 here in the UK, and I really want to know what you're concerned about and what you think might be the solutions. We have a panel of experts to help us unfold it all twixt now and 2 o'clock. Plus, the number 1 seeded tennis player Novak Djokovic will get his day in court tomorrow to challenge the cancellation of his visa in Australia. We'll be joined by a top immigration lawyer to discuss whether here in the UK we would have the power to prevent a global superstar entering the country from abroad on COVID grounds. And as you just heard there in Olivia's news bulletin, the final mirrored wing of the James Webb Telescope was unfolded and fully deployed last night. Scientists will train the big eye of the telescope on the faraway planets to see if those atmospheres could be suitable to live on in the future. We will get the lowdown on what this means for the future of space exploration. So, clever old James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it's as true today as it was in 1992 when he was working for Bill Clinton. The reason it's true is that it is what most folk worry about. Having a job, paying their bills, even putting a little aside for their retirement. We often cloud it in jargon, GDP, inflation, growth and so on. In truth, it's pretty simple. GDP, gross domestic product, is the total value of everything that we make and sell, including the services that we provide to one another and between companies. Inflation, rising prices. All sorts of causes, yes, but it's the difference between what you paid for something last week compared to what you're paying for it this week. And growth? Well, it's just a measure of whether we're making more, doing more, selling more than last time we looked at the numbers. So what are the prospects for the UK in 2022, for you and for me? With all the pressures on the Prime Minister, it's also worth noting that almost anything can be forgiven if we are feeling better off and more secure in our jobs. If we're not, then no amount of bounce or, shall I call it, boosterism will save a Prime Minister presiding over economic decline. Now, the immediate outlook is challenging. Prices are rising currently by a little over 5% a month. That's the average month over the year. On the other hand, it's worse in Germany and in the United States, but ours is predicted to continue rising until at least the middle of this year. After that, less clear. Energy is a nightmare, with the cap on prices due to rise substantially in April, with no easing of prices in the global market. And as world economies generally recover from the coronavirus, that's just going to get worse. In April, our national insurance payments rise, and those for our employers, to help raise another £13 billion for the NHS and one day, when they get round to it, the care services. The amount that we can earn before paying any tax at all is frozen, as are the thresholds for paying higher rate tax. So even if we get a pay rise, we'll pay a little bit more tax. And those of you dependent upon a state pension will see it rise, but not by as much as the old triple lock promised. And interest rates have started to rise, albeit slowly. So if you've got a mortgage, an overdraft, or you use a credit card, you will pay more. And that trend will continue. On the upside, analysts at Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest and most successful investment banks in the world, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank all predict that the UK economy will be the fastest growing among the G7 developed nations this year. Our labour market is the strongest that it's been for decades. There are well over 1 million vacancies in the economy, jobs waiting to be filled. And if anything, the real challenge is that there just aren't enough of us around to fill them all. That will help keep wages strong. The appetite for start-up companies is as strong as it's ever been. Innovation, tiny tech outfits, some of which will blossom into much bigger things, and just bright new ideas of things that folk might like to buy or do or taste. It's all happening out there. One of the greatest unknowns is what the government will do. It could cancel the national insurance and tax rises, but with the public finances already a basket case, that's unlikely. But with politics and the Prime Minister's own prospects playing a part, don't rule anything out. It could pause the green levies and even VAT on those energy prices, but that would run counter to its net zero policy on the environment and give the public finances another knock. But again, politics can make odd things happen. Reducing government debt and the deficit used to be an absolute priority for the Tories, and the increase in borrowing is now sharply slowing down. With the election possibly still a couple of years away, gambles may be taken, but don't hold your breath. Finally, there's trade, with businesses that we do around the world and how we trade with other nations. The post-Brexit settlement is still a work in progress, but little by little, international trade deals are being done. Sure, more is needed and more, I'm sure, will come. Suggestions have even made that the UK should abandon as many tariffs as possible to free up trade and increase turnover in global markets. So, just some thoughts from me. Today, I want to look at what worries you have for 2022 economically. What are the storm clouds and the silver linings? Who can do what and when? What can we do to help ourselves? As the joke goes, if you laid all economists end to end, they still wouldn't reach a conclusion. So I've invited quite a few who are friends of mine to chew it over and leave you to draw your own conclusions. And as always, I do want to hear from you, your concerns, your hopes, your brilliant ideas for making our world a better, wealthier place. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, tweet or go to Facebook. I really do want to hear from you, and we'll share the strongest of those thoughts at the end of the programme. And, as you may have heard me just say before that sting, I'm delighted to be joined in the GB News studio by a very good friend of mine and a man whose work I have admired for a long time. Hamish McRae, looking there terribly modest and thinking about it all, is the principal economic commentator for The Independent and also city columnist for The Mail. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw you sort of looking up and down at one or two of the things that I was saying. But as I always say when I introduce you, Hamish, you're a political economist. You weave the two bits together. So let me start with energy prices, because as I mentioned to you outside before we came in the newspapers, you've got Kwasi Kwarteng for the government coming out saying, we're doing a bit here, we're doing a bit there, we will review it. And then you've got Labour's Rachel Reeves saying, no, we'll have a windfall tax on the energy companies and we'll pour a lot more money into your wallets. It's brutally political.
They've got to do something. This is global gas prices have quadrupled in the last year, doubled in the last year. I think they're actually quadrupled on about 3 years ago. Yeah. So this is huge. You've got to do something. You can't just suddenly have someone's gas bill go up from whatever it is, 800 a year to 2,000. You can't do that. You've got to do something. But you can't affect the global gas price. So what do? You have, I think, to target. But targeting is tricky. You can cut VAT, that saves 5%, or that's easy, you just pull a lever and do that. But actually reaching the people who are hardest hit is tricky. And I think the government wants to try and do the second rather than pull the simple levers.
Yeah. And the targeting is both economic, i.e. folk who are genuinely poor and need it, but it's also political. So that targeting might just be behind the red wall and people like that who the Tories want to keep on board.
Well, I think you can't quite say, well, northern constituencies will have a bigger one than some, and you can't say our people will do better than their people. But mercifully, what you can do is say we will protect the old. We will protect pensioners. We will protect people who are most disadvantaged. And you will say, we won't care who they vote for. We will try and protect the weakest.
On the general issue of inflation, given, as I said there, that there are vacancies out there, wages are beginning to rise in real terms, hopefully productivity following it as well, so it's not just more inflation. Should folk listening to this conversation be really worried about inflation?
I think if you're on a fixed income, the answer is yes. I think if you are in employment or in some way your income is protected against inflation, then I think you can relax a bit.
Which is why the pensions thing is so important.
The pension thing is extremely important. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen to earnings this year. They're rising very fast at the moment. The last time I looked, they're actually rising faster than inflation, but I think inflation's gone up since then, and earnings we don't know about. But your point earlier, there is huge demand for labour. It's actually 1.2 billion jobs that are not filled. May not be the jobs you can do, or may not be in the right place, may not have the skills for them, but that is huge.
Norman Tebbit on your bicycle.
Well, yes, exactly. I mean, I don't think I'd be very good.
Labour mobility is crucial in any modern economy.
Absolutely. Yeah. But fortunately, working from home is fine, but not every job you can work from home. So, I mean, I think that will buoy up wages through the year, which is great.
Yes.
One problem, it embeds inflation if it happens too long. Because if you have wages going up by, say, 7%, then that's a big cost in companies, so they then have to whack up prices even more.
Yeah. And all companies, not least banks and building societies, are very, very quick to put prices up when they have to, less quick to bring them down when they are able to. Talking of interest rates, that's a one-direction race.
Yes. And the only issue is how fast and how far. I think we ought, however, to remember that by any historic standards, interest rates are unbelievably low at the moment. They have never, in real terms, I think, been as low as this for several hundred years. I mean, this is beyond everybody's experience. So they will go up, but I can't see them going up so much as to wreck everybody's budget.
Because it's also worth reminding folk kind enough to listen to us that it's not just my mortgage, your credit card, our overdraft. It's also Her Majesty's government. That they have to pay interest on that colossal debt, both the deficit and the longer-term debt.
Well, and I think something like 30% of that debt is index-linked.
Yes.
So the more, and it's indexed actually to the RPI, the retail price index, going up even more than the consumer price index. So, there is a lot more money to be paid there.
In conclusion, I sense that you're reasonably optimistic, but we need to keep a very firm weather eye on things like inflation and long-term lasting inflation and interest rates. But you write for two great newspapers. Give me a couple of top tips that ordinary folk can do. I mean, I know one obvious one is don't put stuff on the credit card unless you absolutely have to. But just generally, how to keep optimistic going into 2022?
Well, the first thing is, are you in a secure job? Because if you are, you can relax a lot. If you're not, then you need to think about what might go wrong. How do I position myself if the income side goes wrong? Then on the rest of it, it's basics. It's basics. If you have credit card debt, you pay that off and maybe up your mortgage a bit. It's much more sensible to borrow 1.5% than 17. So I think it's also looking at small expenses that we all do that we don't really need? You know, do you really need that stuff? You know, the extra cup of coffee. Actually, probably make better coffee at home.
I love the bit about preparing yourself for employment. We have a security guy here who in his spare time is doing an MBA, and the guy who runs the reception at the hotel I stay at is also doing a business studies degree in his spare time.
Yeah,
Those young people are the future. Hamish, a great pleasure to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Hamish McRae, and you can read more of what Hamish has to say in the Independent newspaper and also in the Mail. Joining me now, another friend of this programme and a good friend of mine, Julian Jessup. Julian's an economics fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs and used to be at the pounding heart of the Treasury as well. Julian, will there be a sense in the Treasury that it'll be all right on the night, like Mr Micawber, something will turn up, or are they all there scratching their heads frantically?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think you and Hamish explained the big issues really, really well, so it's difficult to add much to that. But I think there are a few additional positives on top of the ones that you mentioned. Businesses in particular now seem much more willing to invest, partly because of the easing of Brexit uncertainty. Yes, Brexit's causing lots of problems, but at least we have a clear idea of what those are. Also, the fact that there's a shortage of workers is encouraging people to make sure that those workers can be more productive. So they're putting more money into machinery and equipment to get more from the people that they do employ. So I think investment is going to pick up, and that's key to productivity, which in turn is key to boosting real wages over the longer term. The other positive, I don't think we mentioned yet so far, of course, is the evolution of the COVID pandemic. It does look like the Omicron scare is beginning to pass, and that could have been a massive blow to the economy, but already some of the worst fears seem to be proved wrong. So I think that there are some big reasons to be positive here. That said, there are clearly some negatives. You touched on the risk of higher inflation. I think most of that now is going to be contained to energy prices. Remember that inflation's already hit 5%, so if it does rise to 6%, we've got most of the hit baked in already. But it is right to worry about energy prices because they do hit poorer households particularly hard. And then on top of that, as you say, you've got the tax increases, some of which I'd cancel.
Yeah. Sure. OK. Some of which you'd cancel.
Yeah. Well, the increase in national insurance contributions in particular. Now, in its defence, that does mainly affect middle and higher income households rather than the poorest. So delaying that increase wouldn't do much help to the poorest households struggling with energy bills. But remember that the first year of the increase in national insurance contributions is going to be used to pay for one-off spending linked to the shortage, the backlog of work in the NHS. And I think if that's a one-off cost, it's reasonable to add that to long-term borrowing. It's only in a year or two's time that the national insurance contribution starts to be used to pay for longer-term reforms to social care. So I think there's a decent case for delaying the increase in national insurance contributions for 1 year and simply taking the hit on borrowing in the short term.
Talking of, I interrupted because that's such an important point, and thank you for your clarity on it. I was going to move on to talk about the general level of debt, which must be causing grave concerns both in the Treasury and in Number 10, not least because of the coronavirus, which you referred to, which hopefully is now doing that. When you look at the exchange of views in the newspapers between Kwasi Kwarteng and Rachel Reeves for Labour, it's going to make just dipping into the Treasury coffers tougher going forward, particularly, as Hamish was just saying, as those interest rates and the price of that borrowing goes up.
That's a very good point. I still think, though, that every spending plan has to be considered on its merits. So if there is some decent spending to be done in an area like keeping lateral flow tests a bit cheaper for longer, then that would be a good use of money. Or there's probably some limited investment projects that we should probably be spending more money on as well. But ultimately, the key to getting borrowing back under control and reducing the burden of debt is economic growth. So anything in the short term that slows the economy, whether that's slashing spending or raising taxes, I think is going to be counterproductive. I think there is a case for accepting that we've had this massive shock to the economy because of the COVID pandemic. It does mean that there's been a surge in borrowing and a step increase in the level of debt. But with interest rates still low, I think it's best to focus on boosting economic growth to get that debt burden down again, rather than raising taxes prematurely. And I fear that's the mistake that the Treasury is now making.
Hamish McRae for his top tips. I'm going to do the same to you at the end. He talked about, pay off the credit card, don't put it on the credit card unless you really have to, maybe even increase your mortgage because the interest rate's cheaper and it's a better access to cheap money. But also little things like, do you really need that extra cup of coffee? That long-winded introduction should have given you time to come up with 2 top tips, Julian, so over to you. What's your advice and guidance to folk kind enough to join us for this conversation?
Okay, well, obviously, all the obvious financial tips, some of which Hamish has already made. So, pay off high-interest debt if you can. The 2 other things I would suggest are more about, well-being. We've had a pretty difficult time for the economy, but also for people's, sense of well-being and health and so on. I think one of the best investments you can make is actually in a pair of running shoes. Get out there. The weather's going to be improving over the next few months. Go for a run. Once you've bought your running shoes, it's a relatively cheap thing to do. And the other thing, again, not necessarily about economics, but about well-being, is socialising. Many of us have been stuck in our bedrooms for a year or 2, and I think it's very important to get out and about. Now, ideally, that means going to the pubs, restaurants, and so on, and rebooting the hospitality sector. But at the very least, buy a cup of coffee and sit with your friends on a park bench and get out and about. And I think the economy will fix itself. But we're already starting to see that. But the important thing is, I think, for people to be happier in themselves, and that means exercise and socialising.
Wonderful prescription. Brilliant. Julian, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for finding time for us this Sunday afternoon. That's Julian Jessop's Economics Fellow from the Institute of Economic Affairs. So feel good and get running shoes. Get out there and it'll all be all right, but be cautious. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. The time is 12:25. We have lots more coming up on today's programme, delving into the ongoing story of Novak Djokovic and the cancellation of his visa in Australia. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery, especially across western parts. Best of the dry weather will be in the southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Turning increasingly cloudy across southwest England through this afternoon, with patchy light rain and drizzle moving in from the west. Lighter winds than yesterday too, highs reaching around 9 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to hold on to the dry and sunny weather this afternoon, with just a little cloud from time to time. Wales will see the odd shower this afternoon, but most parts of the country will be dry with sunny spells. Temperatures will reach 8 Celsius. The Midlands will be mostly dry and sunny, but it's a different story for northwest England. Here there will be a lot of cloud around and a few splashes of rain. Cloud amounts will tend to increase across northeast England as well this afternoon. Some patchy light rain is also possible, and it will remain fairly cool out there with a high of 5 Celsius. The best of the afternoon sunshine across northern Scotland, but brightening up in the south too. A few showers still possible from time to time, these largely in the west. Northern Ireland will also see an improvement compared to this morning, with most places seeing some dry and bright weather. A few showers are possible, largely across the north. Into this evening, rain will continue to move into the far west of the UK, a few showers elsewhere. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 12:30. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News television and radio. Now, it's been a story that's been rumbling all over the week, and it doesn't seem to be over yet. It might just be tonight. Tennis world number one Novak Djokovic is currently holed up in an Australian hotel room after facing deportation over his COVID vaccination status. Tomorrow, he'll be able to have his say on why he should stay in the country to have a shot of playing in the Australian Open with the aim of winning his historic 10th title. So it got me thinking about our policy here in the UK. If this was taking place at Wimbledon rather than the Australian Open, would we have the power to cancel Novak Djokovic's visa? Delighted to be joined in the studio now by the man who knows, Harjap Singh Bandal, who is a UK immigration lawyer. Before I come to the specific question about Wimbledon,
yes,
when I've been reading this, I'm not a huge tennis fan, but it's an intriguing story. This is just a case of hardball between a determined government and a global superstar.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case of facts, and as the facts emerge, and therefore the whole angle sort of seems to shift. We've got a person saying, well, I tested positive on the 16th of December, therefore I'm falling under one of the exemptions. This exemption was granted to me by the authorities.
Because infection means antibodies and...
Yes, yeah. But when he turns up at the airport, then he gets questioned by immigration officials, and they say, well, hold on. That doesn't guarantee this. The deadline was the 10th. How did you get this exemption? Yeah. How was this done? And if you did want to enter the tournament, then why didn't you declare by the 10th? Or why haven't you been vaccinated?
So if the Australian government are playing hardball, it's more of a case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing.
It does seem a little bit of that, that someone in the Australian government has provided an exemption when they shouldn't have. However, the Australian government are saying that even if you do have that exemption, that doesn't override an immigration officer's power at the point of entry. Just like if I had an ESTA for America, say 2 years ago, and I land there now, it's up to the guy at the counter whether he lets me in. His job is to question whether there's been a change of circumstance or not. And in clearly this case, the immigration officers are imposing that. So Australia's view, we know it's a hardline view for immigration, and they're very tough on that. Theirs is a model that other countries often look at and say, well, hold on, why aren't we like that? This is what tough immigration rules mean.
Yeah, fascinating. Let's talk about here then the specific example of Wimbledon, I think, is in July, but if it was happening right now, intriguingly, when the travel restrictions were loosened over the last 2 or 3 days, you had Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, basically standing on his chair shouting hurrah, and Sajid Javid, the Care and Health Secretary, saying, oh, I'm a bit worried. So if Djokovic turned up at Heathrow right now, what's his standing? And could that same man or woman at the border say, no way?
I don't think they would turn them away. What would happen is, if you're not fully vaccinated, then you have to do the 2 PCR tests and isolate until you get 2 negative tests on day 2 and day 8. So I think if Djokovic came well in advance, say a month in advance, he'd be fine. But if he wants to turn up a day before Wimbledon or 2 days before Wimbledon, and then he's not fully vaccinated, he'd have to wait the 10 days, and by then the tournament will have started. So the timing would be key there. I don't think the UK, in that respect, is willing to turn away people just who haven't been vaccinated. Maybe red list countries, but even then they have we have a system where we say, hold on, you have to quarantine in a hotel, you have to provide the all clear. We've been very lax in relation to this compared to other countries like Australia and New Zealand. Hence, a lot of people are saying that's why they have a low death rate and we've reached 150,000. If you remember when we were advised that in Italy, in Bergamo, there was a massive outbreak. I mean, to allow flights just come in and out, and I work and live under the flight path right next to Heathrow. So I see planes coming in there every 2 minutes, and they're not cargo planes, they're planes full of passengers. People were getting on there, no tests were required. They were getting on a train or a bus, going to hotels in London, and then walking about on Oxford Street, Regent Street, and therefore the infection was spread. And I think perhaps in order to keep the rates down, Sajid Javid was perhaps saying, well, hold on.
Yeah.
We don't want to increase the burden on people in hospital and the NHS, considering the amount of unvaccinated people that are currently in hospital at the moment. And
final quick one, and it more legal than anything else, nothing to do with your skills in assessing tennis players' prospects. The court case is late tonight in Australia. We should hear tomorrow. Is he going to win it, do you think?
With the line that the government's taking, they've put a 13-page statement in today. They're going to definitely push for him not to win it. He has to win it, otherwise he faces a re-entry ban of 3 years to 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Potentially losing millions of dollars. So I think he's stuck in that place where he knows that if I get deported now, I won't be allowed back for a minimum 3 years, hence losing a lot of money. So it's something that he has to win, perhaps in a situation where if he just walked away at the start, it might not have got this far.
How absolutely intriguing. And then maybe one day we'll talk about the tennis as well. Harjap Singh Bangal, thank you very much indeed for coming in and explaining all of that so lucidly and authoritatively. Good to see you. You're listening to and watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon, including, I'm delighted to say, our Rural Spotlight segment, where we shine a light on the farming and agricultural industries. All of that to come, but first let's bring you right up to date with the news. Here's Olivia Guthrie.
Thank you, Alastair. Here are the latest headlines. The Education Secretary's become the first government minister to back reducing the isolation period from 7 to 5 days. Nadeem Zahawi thinks it would help teaching staff shortages, but says he'll be led by the UK Health Security Agency. Mr Zahawi's also insisting lateral flow tests will remain free following reports they could be limited to high-risk settings. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Labour Party had criticised the move as wrong-headed. Meanwhile, the UK has reached a total COVID-related death toll of more than 150,000 since the pandemic began. Court documents claim Australia's government did not give Novak Djokovic assurance his medical exemption to enter the country would be accepted. His legal team said authorities indicated he met the requirements for quarantine-free entry. Player Renata Vorakova from the Czech Republic has now left the country after having her visa cancelled. And the Duchess of Cambridge has released 3 new portraits to mark turning 40 today. Fashion photographer Paolo Reversi took the birthday pictures, which show Kate in a series of Alexander McQueen dresses with her hair flowing. She's also wearing a pair of earrings that once belonged to her mother-in-law, Diana, Princess of Wales. It's 37 minutes past 12. You're up to date. I'll be back with more on today's main stories at the top of the hour.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 20 to 1, and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, TV and radio. Now, for those who live in towns and cities, it can be easy to lose touch with what's going on in the countryside and the world of farming and agriculture. But goodness me, we are all so dependent upon it. So each week we check in with those at the forefront of our rural industries. And today we're talking about landscape recovery after the first wave of applications is due to open shortly, encouraging farmers and landowners to turn large areas of land into nature reserves or to restore floodplains. It's all part of the plan for farming post-Brexit. The Environment Secretary, George Eustace, describes the move as a generous set of incentives for farmers doing the right thing. Well, I'm joined now by Helen Radmore, there she is, Junior Vice Chair of the Tenant Farmers Association. Great to see you. Have I got what landscape recovery is right? It's post-Brexit and it's a kind of form of rewilding.
It certainly is, but is it available to the tenant farmers sector? We have considerable concerns that the tenants, which there are 30% of us across the country, are tenants, and 50% in the uplands where potentially a lot of these landscape change is going to go on. And we will not, at the present form, be able to enter these agreements. Under the new Agricultural Act 2020, it was allowable for an AHA tenancy, which is a 1986 tenancy, which has more security, to go to their landlord to ask to enter these schemes. And if they refuse, we have a reasonableness test. But unfortunately, with the farm business tenancies, which are very short, the average tenancy in this country for farm business tenancies is 3.21 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, landscape change takes a long time.
Absolutely. Just one quick thing. You said AHA tenancy. What's that?
Agricultural Holdings Act tenancy.
Right,
which
okay.
is the...
So that focuses directly to what you do, because I mean, listening to you carefully there, it seems to me it's a classic clash between somebody who owns thousands and thousands of acres and maybe has 1, 2, 3 tenant farmers who, as it were, rent or have a lease on that land to do their job. But it's their land, and either they go down the road of landscape recovery or they don't.
Very much so, but tenants do have rights. Tenants would very much like security. We are the ones that are doing the work on the ground, on this land, to produce this environmental increase. If it's rewilding, where are we going to eat? We have to eat. A tenant gets get their profit through productivity, which in turn allows us to pay our rent. So there is a very fine balance between environment, farming and food. And the Tenant Farmers Association are concerned that many tenants will not be able to be part of the new schemes, which will be a breakdown of the tenant situation.
But you said also, you had a conversation with one of my team, and you pointed out that you'd been in negotiations and talks with DEFRA, the Farming and Agricultural Department. George Eustace, who was mentioned in the news just now, who himself comes from a farming family. Did he not understand that problem? Did he not get it?
I think that it is a difficult problem, the tenant sector, and how tenants are going to access these schemes. But equally, you've got landlords and landlords' agents that, and particularly the agents, don't always behave very professionally sometimes when dealing with tenants. Tenants obviously are in a very difficult position. Quite often the landlord owns the house they live in, their business, their children go to school at the local schools. So if the loss of tenancy means a terrible upheaval and a tremendous amount of stress to that family, so obviously they are slightly on the back foot when it comes to what a landlord wants.
I mean, interestingly, in the Financial Times today, which is a great newspaper, but not one that tends to delve deeply into agriculture and rural matters, the Financial Times today says the UK's post-Brexit farm payment overhaul is fueled by blind optimism. I mean, they hope it's going to work, but even the FT has its doubts. What do you hope can be achieved, and by when, with whom, to get this on the right footing?
I think we need to carry on with the discussions we're having, and hopefully they will really be listening to the concerns that we have. At the moment, we have very strong concerns. We're very worried about the whole system, how it's going to work. Trees, brilliant, but right tree in the right place. A tenant is not allowed to plant a tree.
Yeah.
Because we're tenants, that's the landlord's prerogative. So there are tenants that are being removed from their tenancies so the landlord can plant trees and get subsidies for it.
It's a tricky dilemma that drills deep into the absolute fundamentals of property and ownership, and as you rightly said at the beginning of our conversation, Helen, how we eat. Keep in touch on this one. It's fascinating, and let me know how you get on with the talks, and maybe we'll find time for another conversation about it. But for the time being, Helen Radmore, thank you very much indeed. That's Helen Radmore there, the Junior Vice Chair of the Tenant Farmers Association. Absolutely classic clash between those who own the land and those who farm it for our benefit. Let's hope that the Department for the Environment were listening and can take it on board. I'm going to stick with the Rural Spotlight because another fascinating story that has cropped up and really directs you. The supermarket Asda has backed out of a commitment that it made in October to stock exclusively British beef. They insist that all fresh beef in its premium extra special tier would remain 100% British, while all the rest of its fresh beef would be sourced from farms in the UK and the Republic of Ireland. In a statement, Asda said, we know that it's important to our customers that the beef on our shelves has been produced to high welfare standards and is affordable. But where does that leave our beef farmers? Well, the man who knows is Neil Shand. He's the chair of the National Beef Association. Asda has spelt that out, but they don't mention beef from abroad. Is that also a problem? I mean, Ireland is abroad as well, but you know what I'm getting at with trade deals with Australia and New Zealand. Is it pressure from cheaper stuff from abroad as well?
Afternoon, Alastair. I would say probably not at the moment. You know, there's a lot of talk about these trade deals that have been done, but the impact of them, there's no reality came through on that. You know, they are predominantly talking about what they source in the Republic of Ireland. And of course, we're deeply disappointed by Asda's, backtracking on their initial commitment. And the fact that they only tried it for about 2.5 months leaves a sour taste.
So is it at the heart of it then, and I hear what you say about Australia and New Zealand, what have you, this is at the heart of it is that Irish beef is good, but it's cheaper than British beef that's good?
I will not comment on differences in quality between British and Southern Irish beef. I think that would be unfair. There is a price difference, and what I will say is that the Republic of Ireland government heavily support their farmers. They get a greater level of support than our producers do. So therefore, it can be perhaps produced a little bit cheaper. The other thing is that they're a mass, they oversupply. They are an exporting country. So it's a supply and demand issue, which will drive price as well.
Have you? I was just talking to the Tenant Farmers Association a moment ago about talking to George Eustace. I'm going to make him a busy man today. What quality of conversations have you been having with the government? Because you seem to me there to significantly shift the blame from ASDA to say you can maybe understand what ASDA's up to, right or wrong, but the government could intervene to try and help out in the same way that the Doyle does in Dublin for Irish farmers.
Right, Alastair, thank you. Firstly, I don't want to be seen to take any pressure away from ASDA. Let's stick with the fact we're disappointed with what they've done. But listen to Helen. She's right. Post-Brexit, agriculture is screaming here for solutions to support and stability. We're facing seismic change with, BPS being removed, all the different pressures that are coming from environmental pressures. And whilst I don't think government should be interfering with deals with retail, they should be making sure that we're able to produce enough food. One of our bigger concerns is food security. The government, as part of the new Ag Bill, they did a food security study, which was launched just on the days before Christmas. And some people will accuse me of playing with numbers, but if we don't include, let's say, exports, we're about 60% self-sufficient. You have a dinner party with a table of 10, more people sat at the table are relying on imported food.
It's an intriguing, shifting world post-Brexit with deals being done, but also the focus coming in so much on our food industries. We were talking on the programme, Neil, the other day with a couple of folk from the pig farming industry, and they are still having a terrible time of it. Would you say that the beef industry is inching towards having the same level and quality of problems as the pork farmers?
We have great sympathy with the pig industry at the moment, and I think they've went through some unbelievable challenges driven by COVID and partly Brexit. I think COVID probably hid the impact of Brexit at the start of 2020. So all these things will only begin to unravel as the world's economy and trade went back to normal. I would say with a degree of confidence that we have seen some logistical issues in beef processing, but we're not anywhere close to the problems faced by the pig industry yet.
Yeah. Final question, and you mentioned in passing food security. We often use that expression in the context of energy security, where we get our gas and our oil and the rest of it from. Do you genuinely feel, Neil, speaking particularly about the beef industry, and I can see that magnificent picture over your left shoulder, I know exactly what that represents, given my name. Is this in jeopardy? We lost the picture. Have we lost Neil? Oh, I'm so sorry, we've lost that link. I was merely going to say whether we ran the risk of actually losing some of these industries. And it's interesting how it relates back to our main story, which is what your economic concerns are for 2022. I'm being told in my ear that we've got Neil back. Sorry, we just lost you for a moment. I was just halfway through saying, coming off the back of your comments about the pork industry, post-Brexit, all sorts of things are chopping and changing. My blunt final question to you, Neil, on behalf of the beef industry is, do you think we seriously run the risk of losing some of these sectors? We can no longer keep up with global markets, be it pork, be it beef, be it whatever. How worried are you?
Close after to the critical stage of where we might lose some sectors, but we still have time to recover that at the moment. But what we need from government very quickly is clarity of what the support system will be. And they need to remember the farmers' focus, as Helen said earlier, is to produce food. We cannot eat trees.
Brilliantly put. Neil Shan, Chairman of the National Beef Association, I wish you well, and thank you very much indeed for your time. Sorry we lost the picture, Jeff, for a moment, but you recovered utterly brilliantly. Well done. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks ever so much. As I say, that was Neil Shand on behalf of the beef industry, and profound, pun entirely intended, food for thought. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News television and radio. Lots more coming up on the programme this afternoon, including some exciting space news. The final wing of the James Webb Telescope was deployed last night, enabling scientists to see all parts of the cosmos, and very soon us as well. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery, especially across western parts. Best of the dry weather will be in the southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Turning increasingly cloudy across southwest England through this afternoon, with patchy light rain and drizzle moving in from the west. Lighter winds than yesterday too, highs reaching around 9 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to hold on to the dry and sunny weather this afternoon, with just a little cloud from time to time. Wales will see the odd shower this afternoon, but most parts of the country will be dry with sunny spells. Temperatures will reach 8 Celsius. The Midlands will be mostly dry and sunny, but it's a different story for northwest England. Here there will be a lot of cloud around and a few splashes of rain. Cloud amounts will tend to increase across northeast England as well this afternoon. Some patchy light rain is also possible, and it will remain fairly cool out there with a high of 5 Celsius. The best of the afternoon sunshine across northern Scotland, but brightening up in the south too. A few showers still possible from time to time, these largely in the west. Northern Ireland will also see an improvement compared to this morning, with most places seeing some dry and bright weather. A few showers are possible, largely across the north. Into this evening, rain will continue to move into the far west of the UK, a few showers elsewhere. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 2.5 minutes to the top of the hour, and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. Now to some exciting space news. The final mirrored wing of the James Webb Telescope was unfolded and fully deployed last night, as Olivia was telling you a little earlier. Scientists will train the big eye of the telescope on the faraway planets to see if those atmospheres could be suitable to live on in the future. Opening the final wing of the telescope will enable them to see further into the cosmos than ever before. Delighted to be joined by a man I was talking to as recently as Friday about how exciting all of this is, space expert Andrew Lound. Andrew, as we were saying just 48 hours ago, we talked about how it was going to happen, and it has now happened. How have you been monitoring developments?
Yeah, I've been tuning in almost 24 hours a day to NASA's live feed on this, which has been quite important to keep a track of what's going on, and the nerve-wracking element of them completely unfolding the whole spacecraft step by step with about 70 or so mechanisms that have to operate perfectly, and the big critical element, of course, was getting the final segment of the mirror to open out, so you've got the full 6.5 meters of mirror segments now opened up and locked into position. And that's really quite important, although we've still got a big step now of calibrating the mirror as each segment is adjusted so you make the perfect curvature of the mirror itself, so it can actually go into operation. And the important element of all this is now to get the temperature of the vehicle down to about minus 233 degrees, which is its optimal operating temperature, because this telescope is looking for objects in the infrared, which essentially, for want of a better term, is looking for heat, essentially, from these distant objects. And you don't want any heat from the spacecraft itself interfering with that. And, of course, that's why it's got this huge sun shield blocking it from the sun to make sure the temperature is extremely cold so that it can actually detect the finest, finest infrared signals that it can actually get. And
I love it all, and I love your enthusiasm for it, but I know your enthusiasm will lift off like a Saturn rocket when the data starts to flow, and that data, little nuanced numbers, are turned into images, as we were saying on Friday, that lovely book I've got at home of Cosmos, which was the work of Hubble. Yeah. When do you start getting that data, and when will we start seeing the images?
They're looking at the end of June at the earliest for images to come through to the general public. So it's going to be a while yet when it's all calibrated, but no doubt the scientists will have them first and have a good look to make sure it's working. End of June. So it's going to be tantalizing for people like me waiting to see these images, hopefully giving us an indication of how the first stars ever formed and the composition of other planets which may have life.
Which, in your view, I mean, I'm biased and an amateur, but which, in your view, is the more important? Because I mentioned looking for planets, their atmosphere, their capacity to support life, whether it's microbes or salient creatures, as opposed to 13 billion years ago, a planet that goes pop, which is what we were talking about on Friday. Which scientifically is the most important?
That's a difficult question to answer. It does depend what your specialism is. It really does, because they'll argue between each other. Personally, both is dead. No, both are, you can't split it. You can't. You're comparing chalk and cheese here. You can't actually split it like that. I think, though, to understand the very beginnings of the universe, I think is going to be so critical to us to understand, because from that, all the other physics come along. So, to be honest, if we had to draw a line from it mathematically, you'd have to say that to understand the formation of the universe is perhaps the most important thing it can do, because all the physics follows along from that, including understanding planetary atmospheres and planetary formation, and the formation of life as well.
Love it. Andrew, always a pleasure. Thanks for Friday. Thanks for today. Keep in touch. And I can't wait until June when we can sit there and pore over the first images. Then you can explain to me how they turn data into images as well. But not for now. That's for another time. Andrew Lound, thank you very much indeed. Andrew, as is self-evident there, is not only a space expert, but articulates it quite brilliantly. It's just slipped past 2 minutes past 1, and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. And we've plenty more to come this afternoon. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome back. If you've been with me since noon, hello and welcome. If you've just joined me here on GB News, I'm Alastair Stewart and we are into our final hour of the show, but we've plenty more to come. We'll be returning to our big topic of the day. It's the economy, stupid. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the full news agenda. Here once again is Olivia Guthrie.
Thank you, Alastair. Good afternoon. I'm Olivia Guthrie. This is your news at 1 o'clock. The Education Secretary has become the first government minister to back reducing the isolation period from 7 to 5 days. Nadhim Zahawi says he'll be led by the UK Health Security Agency on the matter, but he thinks cutting the isolation time would help teaching staff shortages. Well, Mr Zahawi is also insisting lateral flow tests will remain free following reports they could be limited to high-risk settings. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Labour Party had criticised such a wrong-headed move, but Mr Zahawi says he's puzzled by the report in the Sunday Times, suggesting their universal availability might be axed. Meanwhile, the UK has reached a total COVID-related death toll of more than 150,000 since the pandemic began. Court documents claim the Australian government did not give Novak Djokovic an assurance his medical exemption to enter the country would be accepted. The tennis player's legal team has said the authorities indicated he met the requirements for quarantine-free entry. Djokovic is spending a fourth day in an immigration detention centre ahead of a court hearing tomorrow. Immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bandal says there's a lot at stake for the world number one.
He has to win it, otherwise he faces a re-entry ban of 3 years to 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Potentially losing millions of dollars. Yeah. So I think he's stuck in that place where he knows that if I get deported now, I won't be allowed back for a minimum 3 years, hence losing a lot of money. So it's something that he has to win, perhaps in a situation where if he just walked away at the start, it might not have got this far.
Bristol's mayor says symbolic acts like toppling Colston's statue should not replace real systemic change, even though he's glad the monument's no longer up in the city. The UK's first black mayor, Marvin Rees, was speaking after a jury cleared 4 protesters of criminal damage for pulling down a monument to slave trader Edward Colston in 2020. A group of MPs claims the verdict was patently absurd and is calling on the Attorney-General to refer the case to the Court of Appeal. But political commentator Conor Tomlinson says the jury's decision cannot be challenged.
There is no legal precedent set, so it's going to be quite a difficult thing to take this to the Court of Appeals and get this somehow arbitrated. The only problem is, I think it's sitting uncomfortable with a lot of people that there are 11-to-1 majority in a town in this country where they throw out the English way of doing things, which is by the book, by legal precedent, and you don't go around destroying other people's property, public or private, just because you're upset about something.
Foreign Secretary says she's prepared to override unilaterally parts of the post-Brexit agreement on Northern Ireland if negotiations fail. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Liz Truss warns she's willing to trigger Article 16, which would suspend parts of the treaty designed to prevent a hard border with the Republic. She's meeting her EU counterpart next week for face-to-face talks. Talking to GB News earlier, former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Arlene Foster, accused the EU of having double standards.
In fact, they've said, it would cause serious consequences if it was triggered by the United Kingdom, despite the fact, of course, that they triggered it last January in terms of the supply of vaccine exports. They then withdrew it, but in withdrawing it, they said they reserved the right to do it again if necessary.
A no-fly zone could be put over Windsor Castle. The Metropolitan Police are reviewing security at the Queen's residence. An application has been made for a restriction that would prevent aircraft lower than 2,500 foot passing overhead. It's after an alleged intruder carrying a crossbow was arrested on Christmas Day at the castle. And the Duchess of Cambridge has released 3 new portraits to mark turning 40 today. Fashion photographer Paolo Roversi took the birthday pictures, which show Kate in a series of Alexander McQueen dresses with her hair flowing. She's also wearing a pair of earrings that once belonged to her mother-in-law, Diana, Princess of Wales. It's 7 minutes past 1. I'll be bringing you more of the headlines in half an hour. Now let's get back to Alastair.
Olivia, thanks very much indeed. I am indeed Alastair Stewart, and until 2 o'clock I'll be keeping you company along with friends and friendly guests. Still to come, in the face of increased taxes, energy bills and warnings of a cost of living catastrophe, I want to know how you are feeling about the economy. Worried or not at all? 3 new photographs of the Duchess of Cambridge have been released to mark her 40th birthday, as Olivia was just telling you. The portraits taken by fashion photographer Paolo Raversi show her wearing different Alexander McQueen dresses. I'll be reminiscing with a very good friend of mine about some of our favourite royal photos. We will describe them accurately, I promise you, in case you are with us on GB News Radio. We'll be featuring another inspirational person on good causes. I'll be joined by Sam Smith, the founder of Green Ribbon Policing. It's a campaign for better mental health support for police officers. Now, GB News is all about you, our viewers. Any burning questions or stories that you think we need to cover, no matter how small or big they may appear, we do want to hear them. Get your voice heard by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, and do please put Alastair Stewart in the subject line. Incidentally, a lot of you have already been getting in touch, and we'll read out the rest of the comments at the end of the programme about the economy and various other things that have cropped up on the programme, but principally that. Joy got the ball rolling via email. She said, Boris and his advisers have got it all very wrong. Some privileged people are not aware of how the majority of the population live. Very few average earners can afford the increases being suggested by the politicians. I think that's mainly about the tax and the national insurance thing. The politicians are also wrestling with prices of energy, over which they don't appear to have a great deal of control either. Kennedy took to tweet and said, words that will haunt Boris. He's allowed himself to get embroiled in politics, which is destroying people's living standards. Mandates and laws are never a good subject for persuasive argument and open debate, both on COVID and on the Green Deal. Fascinating, that issue of leadership and guidance, which we often talk about here on the programme. I'll have more of those views from you later on in the hour, so keep them coming in. But now let's move from that to one of my other favourite segments, which is Good Causes. This is where we shine a spotlight on an individual or a group of individuals who've gone above and beyond just to try and make the world a better place. Well, my next guest is fighting for better mental health provision for the police, following his own experiences after leaving the force. After working with his local MP, he's been promised a meeting with the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, to discuss the issue further. And I'm delighted to be joined by Sam Smith, founder of Green Ribbon Policing. And there you are. A very good afternoon to you, Sam. I want to tempt you into sharing a little more detail. I mentioned your own experiences as a serving officer there. So what specifically prompted you to establish Green Ribbon Policing?
So I served in policing for about 3 years, which doesn't sound a long time, but actually I think now that's probably about the average sort of career path of a police officer due to the nature of policing. I threw myself in it. It was something I always wanted to do, and I loved the job. I worked hours and hours and hours each day, plenty of overtime. But for 1 minute, you are working in an industry. So I came from a sales background, and I was thrown into policing where I was dealing with dead bodies every day, well, not every day, but a lot of days, dealing with a high level of violence and abuse. And it becomes very normal. But what you don't realise is how it affects your mental health and resilience and the way you look at life. And after about 2 years, I started to struggle. I didn't realise I was struggling, but my partner, who had done a master's in psychology, started to see signs she was concerned. And it kind of just snowballed from there. Eventually, I was signed off work by the GP. I ended up moving and did my last bit of policing in the Channel Islands, trying to get that last sort of start to sort of be able to, I guess, stay in policing but have a slightly more wholesome life. But it ended up with me having to leave because, I started to show signs of potential PTSD. And after leaving, I felt deflated, I felt beaten, I felt like a failure. This is something I wanted to do for my whole life. And then I looked into it and found Cambridge University had done a study in 2017, which showed 1 in 5 police officers in the UK, or at least 1 in 5, have PTSD, many undiagnosed. It said that about a police officer every 2 weeks is taking their own life. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. There was no training, there was no input, there was no help or anything about looking after your mental health in this highly traumatic job.
Yeah, let me come in at exactly that point, Sam, because I wanted you to set it out. And I can hear, as I'm sure you probably can metaphorically, people at home saying, well, that's what policing is like. You do come across dead bodies. You do see dreadful traffic accidents. You meet pretty horrible people smuggling people across the channel, this, that and the other. You said towards the end there that it's the support mechanism that's lacking.
Yeah.
Is it also, to put it bluntly, grilling people when you apply to go to Hendon or wherever it was that you trained to spot the fact that nothing wrong with it, that some people will have the capacity for that and others won't? I mean, it seems to me it's just people are taken on, thrown into it, and then not given the support that they deserve. So it's wonky at both ends.
It's the naivety of it all. So when you join policing, yes, you know you're going to do all that, and you're excited for dealing with, the rock and roll of policing. You don't want to just be sitting there to do an office job. That's not why people join policing. But what you don't know is that if you do not look after, if you do not put certain measures in place, the effect it will have on you. So when I joined policing, I was a typical young male police officer where I thought I'm macho, I could handle all of this. I'm not scared about blood. I don't mind if someone throws a punch at me. Well, hey, and all that sort of stuff. Then what actually happens is, as I said, 2 years down the line, suddenly I'm a different person. I didn't see it coming. I have no idea what happened. I didn't see anything any differently. I wasn't emotional about it. It just happens. And what it is every human being has the same sort of consistent brain, and you deal with, on average, the average person, about 4 to 6 major traumas in your life. Police officers are seeing around 400 to 600 traumas in their career. So they are so exposed to trauma. The lack of sort of debriefing and sort of resilience, their bodies shut down and their PTSD develops. So what I'm asking for is for when you join, so you've got these 20,000 new officers, I want them all to know it's a fantastic job, an amazing job, a hard job, and you will experience all those things and worse. But what I want you to do is not to neglect your mental health. And I want the government to make it a mandatory standard that every police force in this country has to provide certain provisions. So that's training about mental health, and that's officer well-being, not just public well-being.
Sure.
That's talking about resilience.
Let me come in at that point as well, because I think that I've done some work with Oscar Kilo, and in fact, I think I've interviewed the author of that very Cambridge report that you referred to. It's a tough question, and people listening won't necessarily like the answer. Why is Oscar Kilo not up to standard, which is the official mental health wellbeing support structure, and why is your organisation required? Or do you see them working in parallel?
I love to work them. So Oscar Kilo may see me as a threat, but I am not. I want to basically make Oscar Kilo worthwhile and actually really make it more than just a ticky box exercise. So Oscar Kilo is funded, and it's basically there for all police forces. However, individual forces have to use it. Quite often they have to pay to use certain elements. And because there is no standard or obligation to provide mental health well-being for their officers, and because we all know that money is tight, a lot of it doesn't get used. And quite often they are doing things like, for example, they're really pushing well-being dogs. And I love animals, and I really believe in the well-being that animals can give to people. But you've got 140,000 officers are so busy. You're literally working 12-hour shifts, and you don't even have the time to go to the toilet or have a bite to eat. There is no real time to be seeing a well-being dog, and there is no accountability. So my question to Oscar Kilo is, okay, what you're doing, how do you know it's working? Because we are still seeing a ridiculous rate of police suicides.
PTSD, as far as I'm aware, hasn't dipped down, and we're still seeing the same amount of people suffering with it. So if we are not actually recording the outcome, just like with the COVID vaccine, if we didn't actually see any improvement, no one's going to want it. So really what I'm saying here is about accountability and consistency, because I could join one force, say Devon or Cornwall, or another force, the Met, and I'd get completely different input for my own well-being, and that's not right.
I couldn't agree with you more on that final point, but I tell you what, we have to leave it there simply because of the clock. But you keep in touch, because I do have a personal interest in this, and my hope is that you get the meeting with Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, and that maybe what you're doing and what Oscar Kilo are doing can maybe reflect on it and thesis, antithesis, synthesis. But for the time being, good to talk to you, Sam. Thank you very much indeed. That's Sam Smith there, who is a former police officer and the founder of Green Ribbon Policing. He's on Twitter. We exchanged messages last night. Look him up and see what he's up to and why he is up to it. It's an intriguing story. Now, we spoke about this topic in depth yesterday as our big story, but now, following the ruling of the Attorney General in the case of the Colston 4 earlier this week, there have been further developments overnight. It's emerged that a number of Conservative MPs have actually written to Suella Braverman, who is the Attorney General, announcing to her that they disagreed with her ruling and, what's more, the overall verdict in the case. Her ruling was that they couldn't challenge the jury verdict because it came from the jury itself. But Suella had said she was considering possibly appealing to the Court of Appeal on the basis of points of law and the way in which it was conducted. The MPs themselves are looking to overturn the verdict and urging her to reconsider it as an appeal. Well, joining me now is one of the Conservative MPs who signed that letter. It's the Ipswich MP, Tom Hunt. Tom, great to see you. On the first point, and I had to be careful in that introduction because as things stand, it is a point of law. You cannot, I cannot, Suella cannot overturn the verdict of that jury, nor does it set a precedent.
It does set a precedent. I don't see how it couldn't set a precedent. I mean, I think like many millions of people up and down the country, I was, deeply disturbed to see that individuals who had quite clearly committed criminal damage, and I don't think anyone is disputing whether they committed that criminal damage or not, have been acquitted. They've been found not guilty, and they've got away with no punishment whatsoever. So I don't care what it quite clearly sets a precedent, and it will quite clearly encourage others who want to behave in a similar way to act in such a way.
Tom, is this a question of language, Tom, between us, in the sense that, and I went on Twitter to make much the same point that you're making and colleagues are making, and that is to say that having seen the verdict in the Colston 4 case, I don't like X, I don't like Y. It might be Karl Marx in Highgate, or it might be Nelson Mandela in Trafalgar Square. I feel I now have the right to go and tear it down because of the precedent small p that was set in that hearing down in Bristol. But I'm told by barrister after barrister after barrister that it cannot be referred to as a precedent, as a point of law.
Okay. There's legalese interpretations of what's happened, and there's a common man's interpretation of what's happened. Ultimately, if I was a radical leftist who thought all statutes should be toppled and any statute that I think should be toppled, if I saw this case and I saw the individuals in question be properly punished, then I'd probably be not that likely to do it. But if I saw the individuals in question in a very high-profile way be completely let off, I'd probably be more likely to do it. So I guess there's what certain legal experts might determine to be legally a precedent and what I determine to be a precedent. But ultimately, I think that the verdict that was made last week will encourage more such incidents. And I think it's very difficult to argue otherwise. Yeah. I also think it's disappointing that individuals and MPs such as myself, and actually I think probably the majority of the public, probably the silent majority who are appalled by what's happened, are being mischaracterized. People have been attacking me, saying that I want to totally, upend the jury system, and I want to, live in a sort of dictatorship where I decide what's right and wrong, and if there's a verdict I don't like, I completely, get rid of it. That is absolutely not what I've been saying, and it's not what any of the colleagues have been saying who have signed this letter. What we are saying is we think something has gone very, very wrong, because there have been individuals who have committed criminal damage who have clearly done it, but have been found not guilty of committing criminal damage, haven't been punished. That is what's gone wrong, and it's about trying to look at this and try and make sure that it doesn't happen again. I mean, quite how this was conducted. You had historians coming and talking about Edward Colston, whether he was a good guy or whether he was a bad guy. Totally irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. There are democratic and legal processes open to individuals if they think that statue should come down. If they think it should come down, they should engage with those legal and democratic processes. These individuals decided to ignore that, and they decided to break the law and commit criminal damage. The debate about Edward Colston is superfluous. It is of no relevance to this whatsoever. So the fact that you have a jury being dragged into political debates about whether he was or wasn't a good person, or whether or not their course was virtuous or not, isn't what a jury should be doing. So in many senses, many of us think we're the great defenders of the jury in this instance, because we're trying to protect its role and trying to protect it from getting dragged into controversial political debates that in the eyes of millions of people up and down the country will diminish their views. I mean, I know there are certain individuals who are conservative and who I usually agree with, who are, don't agree with me on this one. But I just want to make it absolutely clear that I support the jury system. Yeah. It's partly for that reason, but I'm very keen that this is, and look, as far as I'm concerned, the verdict with regards to the Colston statue has been made. The key thing here is to look at our legal processes to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. So I think we can all see that something wrong happened here. Something really wrong happened here, and I think I think the Attorney General is right to be considering referring it to a Court of Appeal, and indeed I hope she does.
Tom, we have to leave it there, but keep in touch. We'd love to talk to you again when Suella has made her mind up. And I did notice as well that you'd copied the letter to the Home Secretary and the Justice Secretary as well. So all boxes ticked. But for the time being, thanks for your time and for sharing those thoughts. That's Tom Hunt, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Ipswich, who has signed that letter amongst, I think, getting on for 40 Tory backbenchers, asking Suella Benjamin indeed to appeal aspects of that case. We've plenty more to come this afternoon here on Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate, turns 40 today, and stunning portraits to mark her birthday have emerged. Charles Ray will be joining me next to discuss them. First, though, here's your weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery, especially across western parts. Best of the dry weather will be in the southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Turning increasingly cloudy across southwest England through this afternoon, with patchy light rain and drizzle moving in from the west. Lighter winds than yesterday too. Highs reaching around 9 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to hold on to the dry and sunny weather this afternoon, with just a little cloud from time to time. Wales will see the odd shower this afternoon, but most parts of the country will be dry with sunny spells. Temperatures will reach 8 Celsius. The Midlands will be mostly dry and sunny, but it's a different story for northwest England. Here there will be a lot of cloud around and a few splashes of rain. Cloud amounts will tend to increase across northeast England as well this afternoon. Some patchy light rain is also possible, and it will remain fairly cool out there with a high of 5 Celsius. The best of the afternoon sunshine across northern Scotland, but brightening up in the south too. A few showers still possible from time to time, these largely in the west. Northern Ireland will also see an improvement compared to this morning, with most places seeing some dry and bright weather. A few showers are possible, largely across the north. Into this evening, rain will continue to move into the far west of the UK, a few showers elsewhere. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 28, nearly 29 minutes past 1. I'm here right up until 2 o'clock. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. Now, 3 portraits of the Duchess of Cambridge have been released to mark her 40th birthday today. The fashion photographer Paolo Rovesci took the 3 portraits, which will be shown in 3 places meaningful to the Duchess's life so far: Anglesey, Berkshire, and St Andrews, where, of course, she went to university and met the love of her life. The portraits will also be part of the nationwide Coming Home exhibition ahead of the National Portrait Gallery reopening in 2023. My humble opinion is that she looks fabulous, as indeed does Charles Ray, who is sitting there in his study. And before Charles and I start, because a lot of you are kind enough to join us on radio, we'll be referring to the photographs, and obviously you won't be able to see them because you're listening on radio. But there are lots of newspapers out there, and I thoroughly recommend that you pop out and see them, because they are terrific photographs. Charles, former royal commentator, court correspondent on the Sun newspaper, go back a fair old way. I reckon these are some of the best royal photographs I have ever seen.
Oh dear, Alastair. I'm sorry, I was looking forward to the official photographs of Catherine today, and when I opened up my paper this morning, I was dreadfully disappointed.
Oh!
Given that this Paolo Rovesci had quite a lot of time to set up the picture and everything else, I would be surprised if you put any one of these 3 pictures in a picture quiz in a few months' time and ask people to reckon who is it, they'll be hard pushed to recognise it's Catherine. Now, conversely, I've known an awful lot of photographers in my life, and there's a lot of photographers who have taken pictures of Catherine which make her look superb. Well, she is superb, but, you know, they capture her. She is a natural beauty, just like Diana, who very rarely you could have a bad picture of. It is the same with Catherine. And there's a lot of
Charles, let me just butt in at the moment. Exactly perfect timing as you transition there. No, the team put up some pictures. I think they were Mario Testino ones.
Yes, they were. They're fabulous.
So what did Mario capture? There's Diana again for folk watching on television, and let me just describe it. If you're watching on radio, it's with the kind of almost Greek white off-the-shoulder number and the hair swept back. I mean, Diana looking as stunning as she always did. But what did Mario Testino have that this guy hasn't got, Charles?
I just don't think he's done the Duchess of Cambridge proud, in the sense that I don't think he's captured her natural beauty. It looks too much lighting. There's too much background. The dresses are fine. The Alison McQueen dresses are absolutely great. And as I say, Catherine is a very, very good looking woman, and you'd be hard pushed to take a bad picture of her. And if you look at some of the photographers who've put up their own pictures of Catherine today, and remember, they probably only had an inch of a second to get that picture. Some of those pictures are fabulous. There was a picture of Catherine dressed in a gold frock sitting with William at a night out. Fantastic picture, absolutely fantastic picture. These don't do much for me, I'm afraid.
Noting what you've said as a noted critic of photography, and I accept that, you've seen quite a few, and you know Arthur Edwards, one of the greatest ever royal photographers, very well indeed. These portraits in the McQueen frocks would not have been accepted and signed off unless they were what Catherine wanted.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree with you.
It's not the photographer so much as the Duchess herself, who maybe hasn't quite read the room.
I am critical of the photographer because I just think that with the time he would have had available, I would have hoped he would have produced something a bit more special. And I doubt very much if you will refer to these as being special in the future. And if you look at some of the royal pictures we've had in the past, the set-up pictures, there are so many great pictures over the last 100 years of members of the British royal family. I refer to the one in 1980 of the Queen and the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret. And if you remember, they were all dressed in purple outfits. The Queen Mother was in the centre. She had a 3-strand pearl necklace on, and they're looking right down the cameras. Absolutely fantastic. And captured all three sensationally. I just don't think this does Catherine that many favours. But you're absolutely right. She would have looked at them. She chose them. If she's happy, then whatever I say doesn't really matter.
Charles, what you say always matters, and we've run out of time. But when you were saying, sure. I didn't know about the three ladies in purple. I remember the other one I loved was the formal photographs that Patrick Litchfield took at the royal wedding, where he did the formal one. They're all standing there, and then everybody falling all over the place. Patrick was a great photographer and a great guy. Charles, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for your time. Have a great afternoon. Charles Ray, former royal commentator and an old mate of mine from the days we were both industrial correspondents. God, that was a long time ago. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon, including our final say on our big topic today and your final say. With the cost of living set to rise significantly, I've been asking, what are your key concerns and how optimistic are you? You'll also hear my take shortly. But first, let's bring you up to date with all of the news. Here's Olivia Guthrie.
Thank you very much. Here are the latest headlines. The Education Secretary has become the first government minister to back reducing the isolation period from 7 to 5 days. Nadhim Zahawi thinks it would be helpful to teaching staff shortages, but says he will be led by the UK Health Security Agency. Mr Zahawi is also insisting lateral flow tests will remain free following reports they could be limited to high-risk settings. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Labour Party had criticised the move as wrong-headed. Meanwhile, the UK has reached a total COVID-related death toll of more than 150,000 since the pandemic began. Court documents claim Australia's government did not give Novak Djokovic assurance his medical exemption to enter the country would be accepted. His legal team said authorities indicated he met the requirements for quarantine-free entry. Player Renata Rorokova from the Czech Republic has now left the country after having her visa cancelled. And as we've just been hearing, the Duchess of Cambridge has released 3 new portraits to mark turning 40 today. Fashion photographer Paolo Roversi took the birthday pictures, which show Kate in a series of Alexander McQueen dresses with her hair flowing behind her. She's also wearing a pair of earrings that once belonged to her mother-in-law, Diana, Princess of Wales. It's 36 minutes past 1. You're right up to date. I'll have more on today's main stories at the top of the hour.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. It was the American campaign strategist James Carville who coined the phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." Now, our main topic today, how optimistic are you this year as 2022 poses to be the most challenging economic year yet as the cost of living soars? Now, before we listen to what you at home have to say about this, let's listen to what my last guest thinks. And I'm delighted that it's a very good friend of mine, the business and economic commentator, Justin Stewart. I told you while we were waiting to come on that we had great conversations with Hamish McRae and with Julian Jessup. And I think in the main, they were slightly more optimistic than I expected. What does the great Justin Stewart think about 2022?
Well, it's very easy to actually look on the dark side. We've got all these nasty things happening and coming towards us. National insurance rises, or the cost of power, all of those elements. And it's easy to actually have storm clouds. However, actually look what's happening in the economy. Despite the pandemic and despite whatever you think of the politicians involved, actually what you've had is companies still being set up.
Yes.
That's not a small thing. That's an important thing. People are
And
putting
youngsters
money
with
in.
bright young ideas.
Bright young ideas. And also, look at the areas where we're not only just good at, we've actually got a track record on. I hate politicians trying to focus on an industry because that normally ends up in disaster. They don't run businesses. But look at those areas which are already a success, and it's primarily technology. That's where we're really good. Not in London, actually around the hubs, often coming out of the universities. So that old line of Silicon Roundabout, Silicon Hedge Beach, all sorts of things. But it just shows. And of course, once these things start up as a group, then they start spreading out because someone else has got another idea, so it spins out to something else.
Silicon Valley, the ultimate example.
Exactly, perfect example of it.
One thing that the government can do, and I totally agree with you, going right back to the Thatcher days and Tony Benn days even with motorbikes, they're not good at backing winners. But they do dictate the level of borrowing and they do dictate the level of taxation. Jessup, who used to work in the Treasury, said now is the time to pause some of those tax rises and ease off some of those green levies.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. People would expect something to be done. We have a very complicated tax system in this country. We have a very complicated mechanism for, what you're saying, green levies on power. Here's a great opportunity to try and simplify this on a much greater scale. Simplify our tax system and also really focus on actually renewing the tax system, which is encouraging investment. We've got things like ES, Enterprise Investment Schemes. I always say, put an R in front of that, regional enterprise investment schemes. Don't focus on the southeast. But also making sure people are aware of actually how many jobs are being created. Everyone highlights the unemployment the entire time. But there are a lot. You only have to look at the unemployment figures at the moment. Everyone thought it was going to be considerably worse, and it's not. And as we were just saying a few minutes ago, you can talk yourself into this. You know, how to have a depression, be depressed. When actually what you need to be doing is, well, what's creative and constructive? What can I do? And more to the point, working as a team with other people, and you'd be surprised the attitude you can get.
For as long as we've known each other, and it's a long time, you've always struck me as being someone who keeps a weather eye on the rest of the world as well as UK markets, and you have some genuine causes for concern, perhaps greater than concerns you have about the UK elsewhere.
I think there's very serious ones coming up which need to be managed very carefully, and that's one of the worries. Who's managing them? Do we actually have the old mandarins in the Foreign Office with many years of experience? Sadly not, because they move on to other areas. But actually the international issue is important. Why? Well, obviously, America is the world's largest economy, and is going to be so for some time. China's not going to overtake it immediately. And if they're doing well, it spreads out to everybody else. But where are the big risks? It's not so much terrorism and things like that. We have to live with that. No, it's the concern over the politics of what's happening in Eastern Europe, and Ukraine. You've got Russia, which is not a wealthy country. The entire value of the Russian economy is round about slightly less than 50% of Britain.
Chief of the Defence Staff, not an economist, Tony Radakan, a man I know a bit, a brilliant sailor, top admiral of mine, said the other day that the big worry for him from a defence point of view was that nation statehood, as seen in Ukraine, as seen in Russia, is coming back. That's as true about economics as it is about defence policy.
Absolutely, because the two things are married together in terms of actually making sure how much you're funding all the military elements. And Russia spent a huge amount of money on renewing all that stuff. But their economy is not in good shape at all. So that's one area that concerns me, particularly when you've got a very large Russian pour on the gas tap. And will Putin use it? Of course he will. He's said as much already by saying, we're going to give you everything we said we would. Well, what did you actually say?
Yeah. and even tougher on Germany than us.
Much tougher. And of course, you look back, great admiration for what Angela Merkel did. But I have to say, when you look at shutting down nuclear at speed, where here we are a few years later saying nuclear is actually quite a green alternative, but also in terms of Nord Stream 2, that pipeline which was built by the Russians really to upset the Poles and Ukrainians, so it doesn't have to go through them anymore and they can actually control it. So that's a worry, because you're that geopolitical issue whilst everything else is going on.
OK, take you right, we've got about a minute left, so take you right back to where we started there. Hamish McRae said, pay off the credit card, and Julian Jessup said, get some running shoes. Look after your own well-being. What are the Urquhart Stewart top tips? Right, top tips for this is, first of all, don't be afraid. Sit down and start planning things. Not just for you, but for the family. We have the great British dysfunctional family. You know, husband and wife, second-hand husband and wife, grandparents, great-grandparents. And, of course, now look at the value of what they have in terms of assets and also the liabilities you've got coming. And you'll actually get a surprise. Most families, on a bigger scale, are wealthier than they thought they were. It's just that no one ever looks like that. So get the family balance sheet out, sort it out. You may not necessarily like all your family, but that's not the problem. And you almost create what wealthy people would call a family office. But you don't need to be that wealthy. You can actually just do that, managing yourself, your debts and liabilities, all those elements you were discussing earlier, things like credit cards and all those sort of areas. So, yes, do some planning into it so you know what's happening ahead of advance, build in the fact that interest rates are going up. Now you have a realistic picture. And work as a family. Not a bad thing to say. It's a pleasure always to see you. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts and your erudition. There's a good word to stick out there on a Sunday. Justin Urquhart Stewart there with his thoughts. Now, at the top of the show, as I said to Justin there, I spoke to Hamish McRae, the principal economic commentator for The Independent and city columnist for The Mail. He told me what 2022 looks like for the labour market.
We don't know what's going to happen to earnings this year. They're rising very fast at the moment. The last time I looked, they're actually rising faster than inflation, but I think inflation's gone up since then, and earnings we don't know about. But your point earlier, there is huge demand for labour. It's actually 1.2 billion jobs that are not filled. May not be the jobs you can do, or may not be in the right place, may not have the skills for them, but that is huge.
Norman Tebbit on your bicycle.
Well, yes, exactly. I mean, you know, I don't think I'd be very good.
Labour mobility is crucial in any modern economy.
Absolutely. But fortunately, working from home is fine, but not every job you can work from home. So, I mean, I think that will buoy up wages through the year, which is great.
Yes.
One problem, it embeds inflation if it happens too long.
Hamish McRae there from The Independent and indeed The Mail. Next, I spoke to Julian Jessup. Julian's an economics fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs, but also a former Treasury insider. He gave his top financial tip for 2022 and wanted to spread the message for us not to worry too much.
Pay off high interest debt if you can. The two other things I would suggest are more about well-being. We've had a pretty difficult time for the economy, but also for people's sense of well-being and health and so on. One of the best investments you can make is actually in a pair of running shoes. Get out there. The weather's going to be improving over the next few months. Go for a run. Once you've bought your running shoes, it's a relatively cheap thing to do. And the other thing, again, not necessarily about economics, but about well-being, is socialising. Many of us have been stuck in our bedrooms for a year or two, and I think it's very important to get out and about. Now, ideally, that means going to the pubs, restaurants, and so on, and rebooting the hospitality sector. But at the very least, buy a cup of coffee and sit with your friends on a park bench and get out and about. And I think the economy will fix itself. But we're already starting to see that. But the important thing is, I think, for people to be happier in themselves, and that means exercise and socialising.
Julian Jessup there with brilliant thoughts there. So plan to eat more and then to run it off so that you stay healthy. My take. I studied economics at Bristol University and politics, the twin forces to much of what we do and the quality of life that we enjoy. I began work in the late 1970s when Labour were as left could be under Michael Foot, and the Conservatives had rejected the Heathite mantras of intervention and big state economics in favour of the tough free market approach of Margaret Thatcher. On the economy, there were big clashes between the Keynesians, who were all for intervention, government money could solve everything, and the monetarists, who saw inflation as the key evil that could only be controlled by controlling the money supply. It made for a decade of brutal change and was followed by the return of intervention under Blair and, to a lesser extent, under Cameron. The challenges that we face this year are curiously reminiscent of those times. Inflation on the up again, energy crises wherever you look, and the public finances in a mess. But the political class seemed to me to be in a state of confusion. Johnson's a pragmatist, wrestling with the third year of an albeit declining pandemic. His own side say that he's too keen to throw everything the Treasury has and more that it doesn't yet have, at any problem that presents itself. Starmer is seeking to cast himself more in the light of Blair, all things to all men and women, and shed even the memories of Corbyn, who was much more like Foot on the left. This year, we're going to see their true colours. As we wrestle with rising prices, labour shortages, high interest rates, and that global energy crisis, what will they do? Will Johnson rediscover traditional Tory economics and get tough at the first opportunity, or will he cling to intervention and bail out as the election approaches? And if he's still there, will the Tories think it's time for another leader, someone perhaps like Liz Truss, who's more in the Thatcher camp than Johnson? For Labour, it seems a little bit clearer. While Starmer is no Corbyn, his shadow chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is a bailout, windfall tax levying benefit booster when it comes to the cost of living. She's in the papers this morning talking about it, and she's been on telly too. History suggests that the traditional Tory prescription lasts a bit longer, but at a price. Labour's prescription appeals to the voters, but carries long-term costs to all of us as well. The choice will be yours, and perhaps before too long. Finally, two thoughts, and I was delighted to hear Justin touch on one of them. Economics goes in cycles. Dark before dawn, recession before recovery. What goes around comes around. It will get better, but in its own sweet time. Secondly, confidence and optimism are crucial. If you think things can only get worse, they probably will. So, patience, self-belief, and a government that you can trust to do the right thing all matter. I'm a lot more confident of the first than I am the other two, but we'll see. At least the cards are now being shown and being played. Now, you know what I think. It's time for your thoughts on the economy and the outlook for 2022. Let's start with Robert, who emailed, of course, it's not a storm in a teacup. Those who moan never had to endure the Thatcher regime. Interest rates skyrocketed. But this is the worst decade in all my 72 years. This one comes in from Mark. Two serious issues are causing worry for the economy, COVID-19 and the green agenda. The government must sort out the energy crisis now. This will ease much of the worry to start with. Ian joins the conversation. Ditch net zero. The priority must be security of energy, food and borders. Without these basics, everything becomes irrelevant. James says, a simple but overlooked idea to raise more revenue. Why not continue to charge national insurance to any person who continues to work past retirement age? This would raise a few billion. And Dave says, this year sounds so gloomy as it stands, I will struggle. Rising energy prices will wipe me out totally. Plus, the news about free prescriptions being scrapped is seriously worrying, as I'm 64 and have 11 items per month due to various health issues. I'd double check on that prescriptions point if I were you, Dave, but I do hear what you're saying about those energy prices kicking in April. Mark says, I've just had to renew our energy contract and our direct debit has gone from £75 a month to £150. We are on a fixed income, so how are we supposed to afford the increase? That's really seriously tricky. Sean joins the conversation. It's a poor outlook at the moment with the rise in national insurance, gas, fuel and council tax rocketing too. Nothing will go down. Now, some intriguing thoughts there. Thank you for those who wrote those and for the others that we didn't have time for. But I wanted to say that as well as the main topic of discussion today, the economy, you've also been getting in touch about other things that you've seen and heard during the show. And as we say, what matters to you matters to us. So just going to chuck a couple of those in. Bob joined in the conversation via tweet by saying Novak Djokovic and his denial of entry to Australia to play in the Open. He says, didn't the UK waive COVID requirements for the thousands of COP26 attendees? Yet Australia caused all of this fuss. I guess climate change alarmists are exempt. And on the Tory MP's letter to the Attorney General regarding her ruling on the Colston 4, remember that's a ruling over whether she tries to refer it to the Court of Appeal or not. And I had a great conversation with one of the authors. We got this email in, who is it from? It's from John. And John says there needs to be a full investigation into this clear miscarriage of justice. It should look into the police role, how the judge conducted proceedings, and jury vetting procedures. The rule of law has been held in contempt. There are a lot of fault lines in that, but I'm afraid I haven't got time to go through all of them. So, but do be very careful. But it's your argument, it's your position, and we are prepared to share it. Finally, Peter got in touch following this week's Rural Spotlight segment, where, if you remember, we spoke about the Landscape Recovery Scheme. And he says, I am a Yorkshire farmer and generally against subsidies. The Wilding scheme begs the question, where is our food coming from? And food security issues. Well, that cropped up in our conversation. And as I said to both of my guests on that, we will seek to return. They're both wanting to go back to the department and conduct further conversations. There's a huge body of support for rewilding, but at the same time, as that correspondent just said, and my guest said, food security matters. That's it for this weekend. I'm back at 8 on Friday. Until then, have a lovely weekend, or what remains of it. Bye-bye for now.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking showery, especially across western parts. Best of the dry weather will be in the southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Turning increasingly cloudy across southwest England through this afternoon, with patchy light rain and drizzle moving in from the west. Lighter winds than yesterday too, highs reaching around 9 Celsius. Southeast England will continue to hold on to the dry and sunny weather this afternoon, with just a little cloud from time to time. Wales will see the odd shower this afternoon, but most parts of the country will be dry with sunny spells. Temperatures will reach 8 Celsius. The Midlands will be mostly dry and sunny, but it's a different story for northwest England. Here there will be a lot of cloud around and a few splashes of rain. Cloud amounts will tend to increase across northeast England as well this afternoon. Some patchy light rain is also possible, and it will remain fairly cool out there with a high of 5 Celsius. The best of the afternoon sunshine across northern Scotland, but brightening up in the south too. A few showers still possible from time to time, these largely in the west. Northern Ireland will also see an improvement compared to this morning, with most places seeing some dry and bright weather. A few showers are possible, largely across the north. Into this evening, rain will continue to move into the far west of the UK, a few showers elsewhere. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up.
I hug everyone I have.
We'll